So I was supposed to talk about the law of giving, but honestly, I was having a really hard time reading about prosperity when I was focused on praying and seeing rightly all of my loved ones in harm's way. So we're going to talk about the creative process today and how to refocus when fear gets in the way. And the law of giving is really part of the creative process. So I didn't totally skirt what I was supposed to do. So when we have joined with divine mind and we've laid hold of the idea that joy or prosperity or friendship could be mine, and then we couple that idea with our emotion, the manifestation of that is really getting our rear in gear and being more joyous and giving more freely and going out and meeting more people. And this is where we put our feet to this divine idea. So I'm sort of following what I'm supposed to talk about, but not really. So when we remember the creative process is happening all the time, we're always creating, we're always manifesting, whether we're creating from conscious mind or subconscious mind. It's always better to be aware of what thoughts and beliefs we're creating our experiences from. Now, we don't necessarily create the things that happen to us. We didn't create Milton. We didn't create Helene. We create how we feel about and how we react to those things. That's unity principle number 3. I create my experiences by how I feel, think, and believe, right? So we all have these situations or experiences in our lives. Sometimes they keep happening over and over again with little variations, but it finally, hopefully, dawns on us that we're creating from a belief that maybe no longer serves us. And we want to use the creative process to change this part of our life. And we have wonderful tools in Unity to make the change, and they're called affirmations and denials. And I know you all know affirmations and denials, but we're going to go over it one more time. So a denial is going into the garden of your mind and pulling the weeds of error thinking. And an affirmation is planting something productive where you just pulled that weed out. So we pull a weed, we plant a seed, and the overarching theme of this garden is our realization of our oneness with God. So whatever thought or belief doesn't support our firm belief in our oneness with God gets pulled and replaced with an affirmation of my oneness with God. Remember, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all else shall be added unto you. There was a reason Jesus hammered this into his disciples. So a denial is not denying what's going on in the present moment. It's not denying what I'm feeling in my body at this moment. It's to deny any truth in the underlying error thinking that anything can separate me from the truth of God in this moment. And we withdraw that power, we pluck that out, that false belief, and we affirm the truth of the situation. Remember, the first commandment is no false gods. Pull those error beliefs out. The truth, the affirmation we can always say is our statement of being. There is only one power and one presence in my life and in this universe, God, the good, omnipotent. So Charles Fillmore says the simplest effective way to eliminate error thoughts is to withdraw from them the life and substance that feeds them and let them shrivel away into their own nothingness. The change that takes place is transforming power from an error belief to faith in truth through the recognition that God is good and that's all that truly exists. He also says a denial is a relinquishment and should not be made with vehemence. make your denials as though you were gently sweeping away cobwebs. Now that always made me think of blowing my nose. Gross, I know, but blowing your nose and tossing the tissue away. You don't need to think about it anymore. And today in our meditation, I'm going to show you a technique that gently sweeps away those cobwebs. So an affirmation is realization thinking. The realization is when we know what we know in our bones, that it is true, regardless of outer appearances and circumstances. So we become in an inner state of conviction that involves thinking and feeling the truth. So affirmations aren't positive or wishful thinking. Butterworth says that an affirmation is not to make a thing true, but it prepares in consciousness the way of releasing what is already present and waiting to be manifested. You know, even before you ask, I answer. That's what Eric's talking about. So denials and affirmations are retraining our minds to establish the awareness of divine ideas in our consciousness. Remember, affirmations don't change God mind. God mind is absolute and unchanging. They work on changing our consciousness of separation into a consciousness of oneness. Now, there are books and classes you can read, take, to do great denials and affirmations. But our ultimate goal, the reason we use denials and affirmations, is the realization of our oneness with God. And we need to practice, practice, practice. Because we can make a plan and we can say our affirmations every day. What happens if we're focused on prosperity and thinking prosperity instead of my oneness with God? And if I'm just focused on prosperity and a Category 5 hurricane is hurtling itself towards my loved ones, what happens to our brains when fear and anxiety have us by the throat because we haven't been focusing and practicing this feeling of the oneness of God? Well, I tend to temporarily lose my mind, but my husband was very, very sick during COVID, and there was so much going on, and we were isolated, and I fell into that fear trance, and my mind narrowed and fixated, and it was bad. And I had adrenaline pumping through me all the time, and I would wake up gasping in fear, and I was having a really hard time remembering and practicing. There was only one presence and one power in my life. And the idea of using affirmations and denials was having a very hard time getting through my thick head, right? And I had no one in that moment to kick me out of that trance. And one day I was sitting in the hospital next to my husband, and I was fixating on his oxygen saturation numbers. And I felt like my heart was going to beat out of my chest and I was going to pass out right there in the hospital. And then a voice in my head reminded me, and it said, "You are always telling people, if you only knew how much help, unseen help, is always with you, you would never be fearful again." Okay, remember the movie Moonstruck? It had Nicolas Cage and Cher. And there's a point in the movie where Nicolas Cage confesses his love for Cher, and she looks at him and smacks him across the face and says, "Snap out of it." That's what that voice felt like. That was a moment of grace where I was snapped out of my trance and I could take a moment. And in my head, I could walk through, oh, this is just adrenaline in my body. I'm experiencing a chemical reaction in my body. My thoughts of fear triggered adrenaline, and that's okay. That's what thoughts do. And I thanked that voice because it was 100% correct. And I had a moment to remember, it's all God. It's all good. It's all in divine order. Fear not, I am with you. And then this beautiful wave of peace swept over me, and it started at my head and ran down to my feet and released all the adrenaline in my body. And I relaxed into a puddle. And I knew in that moment, I knew in my bones, no matter what happened, despite the appearance right before my eyes, everything was okay. It's all God. It's all good. And two more times that day, this peace just washed through me, this grace, God reminding me, hey, I'm here. It's okay. So we've said before that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and part of being human is having feelings, the good and the bad and the ugly. And we may not want to feel the bad and the ugly, but when we try to deny those very real feelings in our body, they tend to persist. And we know what we resist persists, right? And we want those mostly yucky feelings that lead us to thoughts of separation. We want those to go. We want to nurture them and send them on their way. So shortly after getting my husband home from the hospital, I was listening to a workshop by Tara Brach, and it was on radical acceptance. And she was talking about making space, being in the presence of God for all these aspects of ourselves, feeling what's going on inside, seeing if we can just sit with that feeling without judgment, and then gently exploring the feelings and nurturing or affirming that part of our being. And I was kind of dumbfounded. The steps she took us through, I had spontaneously experienced in the hospital. And she describes the practice that, we've all, when we're reconnected fully to the presence of God in our lives, we can open to what is going on inside of us, the changing flow of sensations and feelings without any resistance. And this allows us to live our life moments with clarity and compassion. And we shift from being lost in unconscious mental and emotional reactivity to inhabiting the presence in our awakening from this trance or this fear. So this technique feels like experiencing denial's affirmations in your body. So the 4 steps she uses are called RAIN: recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. RAIN awakens mindfulness and compassion and applies them to places where we're stuck and, untangles all those emotions in our body. And it provides a way out of fear. And she calls it a U-turn in attention. We're taking a U-turn whenever we shift our attention from outward appearance, like the aftermath of a storm, to the real living experience of God with us, as us. So remember the talk song I just played? The only way through is in. But the trick is we must realize when we're in this trance. And she says it's kind of like being in a dream. We're unaware of this larger reality. And when we awaken, it's like waking up from a dream. And we become self-aware and directly experiencing our inner life and the world we belong to and the space of awareness itself. So living in the presence, we would say living from our Christ consciousness, has 3 primary characteristics according to Tara: wakefulness, openness, and tenderness or love. Now, some spiritual traditions describe, God as open, sunlit sky where presence is full. Like the sky, it's luminous and boundless and provides warmth and nourishment for life and all kinds of weather systems pass through it. Happiness, sorrow, fear, excitement, grief. And the sky, like presence, can hold them all. When we're in a trance, we usually feel separate or alone or threatened. And if we're just in a daily trance, we're not really tending to our spiritual needs. It's like wrapping us in a cocoon of habit. So how do we know if we're in a trance? Well, most of the time we don't. I sure didn't, but there are signs. If you just ate a whole bag of chips without realizing what you were doing, there's a sign. And if everybody in your life today is an idiot, you may be in a trance. And if your shoulders are up to your ears and you're clenching your jaw and muttering your way through the day, you may be in a trance. So we need to recognize our own red flags to help us to know when to take a break and go inward and see what's going on. And all we need to really do is ask ourselves right now, what is my experience of the presence? Just stopping to ask can take us out of this trance. So everybody right now, take a deep breath. Right now, what is your experience of God? So remember Charles Fillmore talking about denials, that taking away that life force from error thinking and it will shrink away. Well, Tara says, thanks to current understanding of neuroplasticity, we know that our brains can change throughout our lives. And that means that even the most deep-rooted and harmful habits can be deconditioned. The phrase that sums it up is neurons that fire together, wire together. And Fillmore knew this 100 years ago. So by changing our patterns of thinking and feeling and behaving, we can change our neural networks. We can reprogram how we react. We can reprogram our principle number 3. So mindfulness positively impacts the structure and function of our brain. And if we go into trance when we encounter stress, we reinforce those fear-based ruts in our mind. But when we become mindful in times of stress, learning to pause and recognize and allow, something different is possible. Something different is possible, and we open up our consciousness to God and infinite possibilities. That's living affirmations and denials. So I want to take you through this practice of rain. And it's from Tara Brach's Radical Compassion book. The practice is all about feeling what's happening in your body and not analyzing anything with your mind. Just out of here. So the first step is to bring to mind a situation where you feel a reaction, such as anger or fear. I don't know, did anybody have anything this week that could possibly pop into their brain? I know I did. So we're going to start with R, which is recognize what is happening as you reflect on the situation. And you're going to ask yourself, what is happening inside of me right now? And then A is allow life to be just as it is. Send a message to your heart. It's okay. Just let it be. That's it. No judgment, no thinking, no analyzing. It's okay. Let it be. Then I is investigate with a gentle, curious attention, being an interested and kind attention to whatever you're experiencing. And then N is we're going to nurture with this loving presence as you sense what is needed. What is your natural response? And then we're going to drop into our heart space for a few moments of silence. Okay, is everybody ready? Okay, get comfy in your seats, everybody. And if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and take a few breaths. And bring to mind a current situation where you might feel stuck, or it elicits a difficult reaction, such as fear or anger. And we're just going to take a moment to enter the experience, visualizing the scene or situation, remembering the words spoken, and sensing any distress. We're going to move into R, recognize what is happening. As you reflect on this situation, ask yourself, what is happening inside me right now? Is there a sensation you're most aware of? An emotion? Is your mind filled with churning thoughts? And just take a moment to be aware of whatever is predominant. What's the overall tone? And there's no need to judge, we're just observing. And now we're moving on to A. Allow life to be just as it is. Send a message to your heart. Just let be this entire experience. Find in yourself the willingness to pause and accept that in these moments, what is. You can experiment with mentally whispering words like, yes, I consent, or let it be. And you might find yourself saying yes to an enormous inner no, to a body and mind contracted in resistance. You might be saying yes to the part of you that is saying, I hate this. And that's okay. That's a natural part of the process. At this point, you are simply noticing what is true and not intending to judge, push away, or control anything you find. We're going to move on to I. Investigate with a gentle, curious attention. Just bring an interested and kind attention to your experience. You might ask, what is the worst part of this? What wants most of my attention? What is most difficult or painful? What's the most difficult or painful thing I am believing? What emotions does this bring up? Fear, anger, grief? Scan your body and ask, where are my feelings about this the strongest? What are the feelings like? Is it a felt sensation, such as a clenched? Is it raw or hot? Are these feelings familiar? Something I've experienced earlier in my life? And just observe, don't analyze. If the most vulnerable, hurting part of me could communicate, what would it express? Words, feelings, images? And how does this part want me to be with it? What does this part most need from me or from God? And instead of thinking about what's going on, keep bringing your attention to your body, directly contacting that felt sense and sensations. Listen for what this place truly needs to begin healing. And then we're going to move on to N, nurture with loving presence. As you sense what is needed, what is your natural response? Calling on the most wise and compassionate part of your being. Offer yourself a loving message or a tender embrace inward. Gently place your hand on your heart if that's what you need. You might visualize a young part of you wrapped in a cozy blanket, illuminated in light. You might imagine someone you trust holding you with love. Discover what best allows you to feel nurturing and what best allows that part of you that is most vulnerable to feel loved and be seen or be safe. Now, as we're coming to the end of our meditation practice, I invite you to drop into your heart space and see if that has expanded, and rest in the awareness and become familiar with it, because this is our true home. And when you're ready, you can come back to the room and open your eyes. Did that feel good? I can't really see anybody, but I'm I'm grateful. Okay, and yeah, let's just take a moment. I needed that. So now we're going, usually this is the time where Reverend Donna has a really cute joke, and I didn't get a joke. Sorry. So we're going to move on to our time in our service when we love and support our church through our tithes and offerings. So if you will say with me our affirmation: divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give and receive. Thank you, God, that this is so. And I put the QR code up there. I think Eileen's going to put the link in the chat, but you can just take your phone and scan that QR code, and it will bring up our website's giving. And I'm going to set us